So at the Game Awards, Microsoft announced the new Perfect Dark CG trailer. We all know what that's like, but I still think there's a lot to unpack within there, especially when you rope in the development from the initiative and everything we know about that studio. There's a lot actually going on here. So let's try and figure out everything we know about the new Perfect Dark. And please, people in the MinnMax Council, please chime in with what you think about the direction, what you want from the new Perfect Dark. This is designed to be a discussion. But yes, this is a new game developed by The Initiative, which is the new studio from Microsoft that's based in Santa Monica. They announced that it was going to be led by Daryl Gallagher, who was the studio head at Crystal Dynamics. And I interviewed him for the Rise of the Tomb Raider cover story back at Game Informer. So I'm really curious to see how much of these discussions was like, well, he led the reboot of Tomb Raider, and so now let's take another female protagonist in gaming, beloved Joanna Dark. Let's have him head up the new studio to reboot that. I'd love to know what other games were on the table, or if it was as literal as that of just Perfect Dark out of the gate here. Rich McLaughlin says, I'm surprised we aren't getting a Perfect Dark remake first, since it's a new studio that usually happens so teams can get to know an engine. That's a great point, Rich. Well, I mean, 4J just made that Perfect Dark remake. Hang on, I say just made. I guess that was 10 years ago, right? 2010 is when that XBLA remake came out, which is available on Rare Replay. You can play it if you have Game Pass. I think it's an excellent remake. Would they want to remake it again? You never know. Maybe they'll do a new texture pack for that remake or something like that. But I'm curious to see how much of a splash it made. I think people are excited on YouTube for the new Perfect Dark. I don't know if people were head over heels. Maybe there's just not enough details yet, but we can zoom in here. So let's zoom in on the trailer itself. Let's try and figure out what we're actually learning about this game and what they revealed. So they say it's eco-sci-fi is how they describe the theme of the new Perfect Dark. So it's set in the future, obviously, and the world has run amok. It seems like global warming has torn everything apart. There's superstorms, there's flooding, everything going on here, which is really interesting to see Microsoft embrace the theme of storms with Perfect Dark here. And that seems like it's going to be a big part of the game. I mean, the final shot is Joanna looking outside from Egypt of just this huge storm in the distance. So clearly that's going to be a big part of gameplay and story. But it's odd because that was also such a big push for Gears of War 4. If you remember, like the first demos for Gears of War 4 was like, look at this storm tech. This wind is crazy. And then even Just Cause 4 also was pushing storms. So the idea of storms being a big element in Perfect Dark, it'll be a cool way to show the technology, but it's also how Microsoft showed off the last generation with Gears of War 4 for at least that one kind of spooky scene. Joel Coase says procedural weather events. That'd be interesting just to try and shake it up. That could be. But just in terms of connections to Gears of War 4, it was interesting that shows a skyscraper, working your way up. Turns out it's Datadyne skyscraper. Awesome. But that reminded me so much. And the way they're talking about, we really enjoy spy-fi, as they put it, and being all in on this kind of like secret agent vision of what they want to create here. It reminds me of the tease that was released by the studio that made Gears of War 4 and also 5, the Coalition, back when they were called Black Tusk. If you recall E3 2013, they revealed a teaser that was a spy running up a skyscraper. And there were even theories that that was Perfect Dark. I believe it was a new IP, but it's interesting to see another Microsoft studio take another run at a spy thriller after they canceled that one and then gave that studio Gears of War. In the trailer itself, flying through the environment, a lot of the camera being loose all over the place. It goes through a market that looks a lot like the market from Anthem, but it's a cool way to show off just a dynamic environment. You get the idea. And then there actually was a tease or a hint that it was Perfect Dark before they got to Datadyne, which was there is a laptop gun on the wall. And so some people talking about like, oh, that's just a turret. But it's like, you don't have a gun turret on a wall in Perfect Dark and not have it be a reference to the laptop gun, one of the coolest weapons in gaming. So it's awesome. Also in that skyscraper, there is a shot as it's going through one of the environments that has like a poster, and I don't know what that is because I can't read that language, but I would love to know if anybody has actually translated what's on that poster in the building just for a little more lore context. But the themes, according to the narration, is the overall idea here is it's going to be the fact that these superstorms are tearing apart, weather is destroying the planet, global warming, everything. And then these corporations have risen up to help save the planet. But believe it or not, some of these corporations can be evil. So it's going to be corporation warfare, a lot like the first Perfect Dark was, right? But it's fun to see Microsoft again, accidentally, I guess, in the grand finale of it. But again, have another franchise, much like The Outer Worlds, which is going to be kind of an anti-corporate message. Or maybe it's going to be pro-corporate, just anti-Datadyne. We'll see exactly how that works out. Another thing that people were losing their mind about in the trailer was Joanna Dark and her line at the end saying, "This is just the beginning," which is a pretty clear tease that this is a reboot and that, hey, ongoing. But the fact that she has the American accent, people are already like, not my Joanna. She needs to be British, which I agree. I know it's not developed by Rare, the British developer anymore, but I think having the British accent is just cooler. You want your spies to have British accents. Please give her a British accent. But that's kind of a sign of a lot of things with Rare that they're kind of shifting away from that we can talk about here. But in addition to the Perfect Dark trailer, there was also an interview that was uploaded to Xbox's YouTube channel with developers from the initiative talking about it. They confirmed in that interview that it is reinventing the franchise. The way they describe their passion for this secret agent world, it has me wondering, like, is this game going to play like a Deus Ex? Like, how much are they going to go into this world? I'm very curious to see what their vision of this is. And I love Perfect Dark dearly. One of my favorite games of all time. Specifically, I love the multiplayer of Perfect Dark. And so hearing studio head Daryl Gallagher in that video say that he wants the story to, quote, stand alongside peers in television and movies. I love a good story in games. No doubt about it. I just worry a little bit that this is going to be a hard lean in on story. I'd rather just have fun playing with the Perfect Dark weapons. But that's just me. I'm curious to see, in the comments if people are more excited about Perfect Dark for single player or multiplayer. I'd imagine it's going to be that weird fusion. And, good luck to the initiative for trying to hit that right balance between the two. But in that video, they showed more concept art for Perfect Dark, including, who knows where this is going to be in the game, but it's shots of Joanna Dark taking a hostage and stuff like that. So we'll be curious to see if that's incorporated into gameplay, everything like that. And they talk about how they want to be more agile this time around. And so the idea of that camera flying through all those environments, I think that was a tease of where they're going with it, where they want Joanna Dark to be more able to, they say, slide under things, jump over things. They are inspired by body cams and GoPros. So I wonder how much Mirror's Edge DNA is going to be in this new Perfect Dark, because based on those discussions and the talking point and the way that camera was moving in that trailer, obviously not gameplay, but just to give you an idea, I think, of how fluid they want it to be, I'm curious to see if that Mirror's Edge community is going to latch on to the sci-fi of Perfect Dark now. So in that trailer, they also talk about how they want the world to be interesting, of course, and they say that they want it to be a world that people would, quote, be excited to come back to, that was unique and had its own flavor. Obviously, in this era of video games, you can't say we want a world that you'll be excited to come back to and not give that pause of what is this going to be a living game? What is this exactly? It could just be they want to create a fascinating world and that's it. But that wording in the first interview about the game, I would read into a little bit that they maybe do want to do some updates to this game. We can talk about that later. A lot of excitement out there, a lot of excitement and just a lot of things to tear into the trailer and try and dissect. Obviously, no aliens. Has me a little bit worried. This might be a Perfect Dark Zero situation of, since it's the reboot, I hope to God that they don't save aliens until the very end, because that seems like that's the core of Perfect Dark. People want sci-fi, people want aliens. Specifically, people want to have alien weapons. And so here's hoping that they embrace aliens. But it brought me back to, there's an interesting video from Unseen64 talking about the scrapped sequel to Perfect Dark. Well, kind of a sequel to Perfect Dark Zero, timeline-wise, but story-wise, development timeline, but story-wise, it's a sequel to Perfect Dark from Nintendo 64. But there's a game in 2006, 2007 that Rare was working on called Perfect Dark Core, which is interesting to look back on these details. And Chris Seaver, who worked on, a lot of old Rare stuff, Conker's Bad Fur Day, in this Unseen64 video, they talk about how his goal was to create a more mature, weathered Joanna, that was, leaning into the sci-fi angle, and that the first level of this Perfect Dark Core video game, which was scrapped, was going to be Joanna in Cairo. And so it's fascinating to see her in Cairo for this reveal trailer for the new one. And maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's just a cool location to put her. I wonder if they went back to any of those archives and are pulling from that stuff for at least a nod to this scrap Perfect Dark game. Chris Seavor, though, the developer of, or the lead of that project back in the day, he was tweeting about watching the Game Awards, and he did not share any reaction about Perfect Dark. At least during the Game Awards, he was not tweeting out his excitement for it, which kind of had me worried. You think you'd see somebody that worked on the franchise for so long be like, hey, cool to see it come back or something, but that's fine. So this Perfect Dark core game was going to be episodic. The next game was going to be Perfect Dark Vengeance. Apparently, Microsoft thought they had too many sci-fi shooters at the time with Halo and Gears of War and ended up scrapping it. But again, I'm curious to see how much is carried through, if anything, into this new reboot of Perfect Dark. Phil Spencer, head of Xbox these days, he has gotten to play the new Perfect Dark. He tweeted a while ago that he was visiting the initiative. He said, quote, incredibly talented studio challenging themselves to do new things and old things in new ways. So he has played this thing. He has teased a picture of him even playing it on Twitter. So it's, there's something there. We are beyond just, an early conceptual phase of where this thing is out. And I'm trying to remember where this thing is at, I should say, but I'm trying to remember where it is. I think it was in an interview with Phil Spencer, but at some point he mentioned that he's excited for what the initiative is building. And he mentioned that he's excited for how it's going to be rolled out. Like it was going to be presented in a different way. And so I don't know if that's development strategy or if they're going to take some of that episodic model, or if what they're going to do is release single player and then release multiplayer later on, which is where I'm leaning. I think that's what they're doing. If you look at like their job postings, they aren't building up a multiplayer team as far as we can tell. You think they'd be putting that call out there. And especially with Microsoft's approach with the Game Pass formula, it seems like it would make more sense to have two distinct bites at the apple of, hey, Perfect Dark is out. And then a year later, 2 years later, here's Perfect Dark's multiplayer. Like, why wouldn't you spread those out? In this new era of gaming at Microsoft, I don't know what the advantage would be of putting everything in one package anymore. So that's what I think that might be hinting at with them talking about rolling things out a little bit differently and a world you want to come back to. I don't know. Would that mean episodic story content? I doubt it, but we'll see. So before this, what we knew about the studio, there were a lot of rumors about what the initiative was working on. They were looking to hire people. Oh, there was a LinkedIn profile, actually, that was talking about somebody who was scripting various weapons, gadgets, and a camera surveillance system for an unannounced project. So that was leaning towards Perfect Dark. I think we talked about it on the MinnMax Show podcast at the time. And in terms of who the initiative has kind of hired up throughout time, it's a lot of talent from California, obviously. So being in Santa Monica, they've pulled some folks from Sony Santa Monica studio from Sony. The lead producer, Brian Westergaard, who's the lead producer for God of War. He is now working on Perfect Dark. There's also a lot of folks from Respawn that have been pulled over. The game director, Dan Newberger, he was at Crystal Dynamics since 2003. So he was the game director on some of the Tomb Raider games, obviously worked with Daryl Gallagher, who was the head of that studio, so brought him over. I'm very interested in this. The design director is Drew Murray, who was at Insomniac, and he was the game director on Sunset Overdrive. So you talk about, an agile environment and being able to traverse your world. There is some experience there. He's also the lead designer on Resistance 3, and he also worked as a designer on Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction. So if you need some good Perfect Dark gadgets, having some of that Insomniac DNA seems like a good choice. Senior producer Victoria Miller, lead level design Chris O'Neill, who was working on the multiplayer of Metal Gear Solid 5, and he also worked on God of War. So I'm curious to see what he's adding to the team as well. The lead writer for the game is Christine Thompson. Christine Thompson, who was at Bungie, working on Destiny 2 and Forsaken. I visited Bungie for a Game Informer cover story trip and actually interviewed Christine Thompson. She seemed obviously very nice, very talented. And so it's fun to see her transition from one sci-fi world of Bungie now as the lead writer of Perfect Dark. Excited to see what that actually looks like. And there were headlines a while ago that the initiative had hired up Rockstar's tech director, which a lot of folks were excited about. But the interesting detail is that's Tom Shepard, and he actually left about after a year at the initiative, and now he's the co-studio head at Rockstar. So he is no longer at that studio, just for trying to get a lay of the land for this talent. Christian Cantamessa, is the narrative consultant. It was announced earlier, I think at some point, people writing the headline that, oh, the Red Dead Redemption writer is working on the initiative's new game. But that's not exactly right. So he's a narrative consultant, whereas Christine Thompson is going to be the actual lead writer for the game. But Christian Cantamessa, he's interesting. He co-wrote Red Dead Redemption 1, obviously incredible. He also was a writer on Shadow of Mordor, and I forget if Shadow of War he worked on as well. But I interviewed him, visited Monolith back at Game Informer for the cover story on Shadow of Mordor. And so he actually posted on LinkedIn that he directed the trailer. So he is the cinematics director for Perfect Dark. He directed the trailer and also the narrative consultant. So it's not in the weeds writing, but they wanted that Red Dead attachment, I think, is a good consulting gig. And obviously, you can't just take the greatest games that all these people have worked on and say, well, the new Perfect Dark will be as good as God of War or as good as Red Dead Redemption. That's a stretch, but it's a good sign of looking at where these teams are coming from, you know, their experience and trying to imagine what that would look like with them all working together, which it always has me thinking about the initiative and them hiring so many folks from the Santa Monica area, and the fact that Microsoft has a lot of money, and the fact that Cory Barlog just wrapped up, you know, God of War in 2018, right when the studio's taking off. I would be surprised if there weren't conversations about trying to lure Cory Barlog to the initiative. Like, hey, you know, Shannon Studstill, the head of the studio at Sony Santa Monica, left not too long ago to go to Stadia. It's kind of a time of change. Cory's not directing the next God of War. I would imagine they floated it by him, but who knows? So again, yeah, no multiplayer leads have been hired yet. No hints that that's happening. My money's on them making it 2 separate releases, because it would be insane not to have multiplayer for Perfect Dark, but it's also insane to have a new studio built from the ground up and tackling this project. So that's going to be monumental. It's going to be a real achievement if they can pull this off and pull it off well. So I think tackling multiplayer at the same time is going to be a lot to chew on. Obviously, if you love Perfect Dark, you love the music of Perfect Dark. And it was a real bummer to see Grant Kirkhope, composer of Perfect Dark, composer of so many things at Rare. He tweeted out that, hey, Perfect Dark is back. And no, I have nothing to do with it. And then David Kleinek, who's the co-composer for Perfect Dark, I believe he wrote the Chicago stealth level music, which is just incredible. He also tweeted, I have nothing to do with it either. And then Grant Kirkhope responded, yes, we're yesterday's news, which is a real bummer. Like, I'm surprised Microsoft doesn't pull from the old music talent. Like, especially, you know, with Halo, you could pull in Marty O'Donnell, at least to write one new theme for Halo, or just have something cool for Halo Infinite. Maybe they're working on it. Maybe they've yet to announce it. But I was bummed out to see Grant Kirkhope, at least at this point, saying he's not working on it. I would beg Microsoft to at least get some of that old Rare composing talent on board for the new reboot of Perfect Dark, just for one track. Like, you have to have some of that old music, and I hope they don't throw it all away. That is my wish. I hope it's not like the God of War reboot where it's like, all right, completely new direction for the music. I'm sure they're excited to hire some fancy new composer, but at least have some nods to the classic Perfect Dark soundtrack, because it's so incredible and I think integral to that experience. In terms of when the Perfect Dark game is coming out, the original game was set in 2023. Perfect Dark Zero was set in 2020, which everybody remembers and lives each and every day. Do you think 2023 is a reasonable release date for this? Probably. It'd be cool to tie it up like that. I mean, this is an early trailer. It's going to be a while before this thing is up and running, especially because the studio is still relatively new. They still are building so many aspects over there. I would hope it'd be up for 2023. Maybe the multiplayer edition will be out in 2023 if that holds true. But again, that's just me spitballing what I am guessing will happen. But hopefully it'll be out before then. And again, I think this game is a complete failure if it does not have the aliens somehow tied into that story and not the tease at the end. I pray to God that it's going to be more than just the final shot is Elvis coming in and be like, Joanna, please be more than that. But I believe that's everything we know about Perfect Dark Zero. I'm sorry, not Perfect Dark Zero, of course. I believe that's everything we know about the new Perfect Dark. Let us know in the comments what you think about the new Perfect Dark, what you're hoping for, if there's any details I missed. all that fun stuff. This was just a clip from MinnMax, which is our weekly Q&A for supporters on Patreon. Every Monday, we stream for what we call the High Council, and we answer any question they have about the game industry, our past, MinnMax's future, and on the last Sunday of every month, we actually have a call-in version of MinnMax. So check out patreon.com/MinnMax2ns, and please give it a shot. Thanks so much.